Everybody. Well, okay, not everybody. There's a few Iowa State fans out there, maybe some TCU fans. Oh, who knows, maybe a few Baylor fans down in Waco. Not predicting Oklahoma and Texas to play in the Big 12 championship game. But basically, everybody is selecting Oklahoma in a rematch against Texas in the Big 12 championship game. But if one of those two teams don't make it, who would? How about Iowa State? Looking at ISU at Big 12 Media Days, MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, just heard from Matt Campbell. What a job he has done in Ames. 8-5 the past 2 years, 5-4 in the Big 12 2 years ago, 6-3 in the conference this past season. And that's the most conference wins Iowa State has ever accumulated. And consider that they missed the opening week game against San Diego State, so they didn't have that one-game buffer to get ready and improve from game 1 to game 2. Cliche, but definitely true that most teams get that game under their belts and they improve into week 2. Well, they had to go to Iowa against a difficult Iowa team, a top 25 club, and they lost that game by 10. They lost to Oklahoma by 10. They started the season 0-3 after losing to TCU as well by just 3 points. Then they kicked it into gear. Brock Purdy came onto the scene, and they were a much different team down the backstretch of the season and lost to a top 10 Washington State team in the Alamo Bowl in one of the more entertaining games of the bowl season, 28-26. And even that game was controversial with some calls late in the game. So Iowa State is on a roll, and they do it with a defense, and they have now found a quarterback who's not just a workman-like, let's run the ball, let's throw some short passes and keep the ball away from the other team type of player in 2018 freshman Brock Purdy. Okay, Matt Campbell took the podium, and he was asked about recruiting. And most coaches give you coach speak, of course, and we've seen that to most of today in the Big 12 and the SEC. But Matt Campbell basically outlined the type of player that they need at Iowa State, a guy that he believes will buy into the system, trust his teammates, will work his tail off, and who's a very character-driven guy. And he flat out said that despite our success, we can't look at the recruiting rankings. We can't think that we're going to recruit with the high-level elite teams in the Big 12 or across the country. We have to remember who we are, what we are. Don't get wrapped up in the recruiting rankings. That's not us. Not everyone is cut out to come to Ames, Iowa. And we're not cut out for everyone, and not everyone's cut out for us, regardless of how good they are. So on the subject of Brock Purdy, of course, he came into the Iowa State game plan, 10 games to go in the season, completed 66% of his passes, 16 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and really gave the Iowa State defense or the Iowa State offense some identity. And he has kind of the it factor, and that's at least what Matt Campbell called it. And what is the it factor? Well, it's obviously something that you can't put your finger on, but it's basically confidence, a healthy balance of swag and humility to be a leader in the mold of a true leader, not just a rah-rah guy, a guy that talks, but a guy that shows by example, that works his tail off, that works harder than everybody else in the room, a guy that is a servant leader, will give to the rest of the team, and that seems to be the guy that Brock Purdy is. Now, athletically, he can run it, runs that RPO as well as anybody, considering a true freshman taking over that offense into the season, not as the number one guy with the number one reps in the offseason. So imagine Brock Purdy that we saw last year with the stats that I just mentioned, now going through a full spring, individual workouts in the summer, now the August camp coming up, and him starting in game 1 against Northern Iowa. The offensive line has 4 seniors back. Matt Campbell mentioned that the offensive line was by far the weakest unit on the field, the least developed when he took over. Let's see, this was prior to the 2016 season in which they went 3-9. That it was a rebuilding project, but they've rebuilt it. Not with 5 stars, but took the guys that they had and developed them, and now they've got 4 seniors who really know how to play and know what they're doing and can lead the offense. Okay, but they are not blocking any longer for David Montgomery, one of the best running backs in college football, who gained over 1,200 yards rushing and scored 13 touchdowns. They actually have 5 running backs in play. They've got 3 guys who were already on campus who have played, but played sparingly. So they've dipped their toe in the water of Big 12 play. These 3 guys have between 22 and 39 carries last season, but they also have 2 incoming freshmen. Their top 2 recruits in Jahiri Brock, hope I pronounced his first name correctly, Jirehi, Jahiri Brock, who was the 17th rated running back in the nation according to the 247 Sports Composite, coming out of Illinois, and then a Kansas running back in Breece Hall, the 22nd ranked running back in the nation. So those 2 kids could factor. One of them already have started spring ball, and then the other one's coming on campus in just a few weeks and will be ready to go, we presume. No Hakeem Butler, by far the best receiving threat, 60 catches, 9 touchdowns, and it was some of his inconsistencies that led to him plummeting in the draft, but just a freak player that I enjoyed watching and had some exceptional catches to keep Iowa State in the game last year against Oklahoma, 37-27, but also putting up some big numbers as ISU beat Oklahoma the year before. All right, the defense has been the stalwart of the rebuilding project. Number 1 in the league in points against. Number 2 rushing defense, number 3 pass defense. So they're strong on all 3 levels, all 3 phases. Jaquan Bailey, 14.5 tackles for loss and 8 sacks. He's back. Ray Lima's a leader along the defensive front. He's back. Marcel Spear, 69 tackles, 8 tackles for loss. And Greg Eisworth on the back end, 87 total tackles to lead the team. All these kids are back. All right, the coaching staff consistency. Most of these guys Matt Campbell brought from Toledo with him. They built the program at Toledo. They got used to winning. They had a winning culture. They knew what they needed to do to build a program and sustain the winning culture, sustain the run. They moved to Iowa State. Matt Campbell keeps that coaching staff basically with him, and one of the key guys that he lost was offensive coordinator Tom Manning, who checked in to the NFL last season for 1 year with the Indianapolis Colts, and now he's back to run the offense for Coach Matt Campbell. Tom Manning is back as offensive coordinator. There was a lot of conversation both in the personal interviews and also at the podium about culture. We hear that term thrown around. Either when a coach takes over a program and he's the new first-year head coach, okay, how are you going to establish your culture? And then we also get the culture question when it's a Matt Campbell who has obviously raised the stakes, raised the winning, and started to rebuild the program. And has rebuilt it to a certain extent. Not quite to win a Big 12 championship yet, but from 2 wins to 8, it's been pretty remarkable. So he just talked about you've got to instill an inner belief in the kids, a confidence that they can do it. You've got to trust. It's the ultimate team game. I'm saying that, not Matt Campbell. It's the ultimate team game in regards to fighting for the guy next to you. When you look at offensive lines in particular, those guys have to play for each other, and so there has to be an amount of trust there. Trust that the other guy is going to take care of his assignment, and Matt Campbell has been able to instill that type of football in this Iowa State Cyclones team. He was asked about the NFL, his name popping up for NFL jobs, and he didn't discount that he would ever want to pursue an NFL job. He just basically said, my number one goal as a coach is to take 18-year-old men and then convert them and develop them into 22-year-old mature men leaving school. That's my number one goal. That's why I'm here. This is what I do. Well, he's there to win football games, and he's doing that. The schedule plays out in a way in which they get Iowa, their main opponent out of conference, of course. They get that game at home this year. Lost to the Hawkeyes last year, 13-3 on the road. 2 years ago, they played a stellar, great game against the Hawkeyes, 44-41 in overtime. There was talk about this team being 8-0 going into the Oklahoma game. So they avoid the Sooners and the Longhorns into November. They will be 8 games into the season before they face them back-to-back. Oklahoma and Texas back-to-back. So there's thoughts about them being 8-0 because they can beat everyone on their schedule through the first 8 games. Well, they can beat anyone on their schedule, period, but especially through the first 8 games. Let's put the brakes on because we also need to consider that while Iowa State has proven in the last 2 years that they don't get blown out by anybody, their biggest margin of defeat in these 2 seasons over the span of 26 games has been losing to Texas this past year, 24-10. So they've not been blown out. They've been in every game, but they're also in every game for the most part in conference play that they win. So they're also playing close margin games that they win. So teams like Baylor and Texas Tech and Oklahoma State can jump up and defeat Iowa State as well. So it runs both ways. So to expect this football team to be 8-0, it's possible, but to be 8-0 entering the Oklahoma-Texas stretch is a bit much to ask, in my opinion. But again, they don't get blown out. They stay in games. They play the rock-solid defense. They actually got unlucky, if you believe in the turnover margin statistic, based on the disruptive plays that they made, and that's what the defense really thrives on, is making disruptive plays, is that they were unlucky in turnover margins. So that statistic could play into their favor here in 2019. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Checking out Big 12 Media Days. Would love to have you comment to let us know what you think of Iowa State football under Matt Campbell into Season 4. We will be back with more look at the Big 12 and the SEC right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football.